Welcome, my friends. It might be that time of year where you are just getting your garden really put into the ground, but it is not too early to start thinking about canning season and consider how we might want to start preparing for canning season right now. Today, I want to give you some ideas on ways that you can begin preparing for canning season by sharing with you 10 essential items that you may want to consider stocking up on now. For this discussion, I'm running under the assumption that you already have some of your big items, such as the actual canner and some of your non-consumable canning items that you'll be using year after year. If that's something that you still need to invest in and you're still trying to kind of figure out what you need, I will link to a couple of videos in the description below that share, one shares the difference between a water bath canner and a pressure canner, and the other video talks about some of the canning essentials that you might want to consider investing in and having on hand. The items that we're going to be discussing today are mainly consumables, with the exception of one particular item that I have on this list. And there are a few different reasons why I think that you may want to consider stocking up on these items right now rather than waiting until it's closer to harvest time and you're really ready to dive into canning. And so as we go through today's discussion, I'll be sharing some of those reasons with you. The first item I have on this list is your canning jar. The reason why I've added this to a list of things that you may want to stock up on is because even if you have canning jars right now, I want you to consider maybe what you're planning to can this year and whether or not you have the right size and whether or not you have enough quantity of canning jars to get the job done. I mainly have used regular mouth pint jars for a majority of my canning needs. Last year, I decided to branch out a little bit and realized that I didn't have all the canning jars that I needed to have. I love using half pints for jellies. Sometimes I'll use them for things like bread and butter pickles, or anything that I don't see myself using a large quantity of is great to go in the half pint jars. And last year I did have enough of these on hand to do what I needed to do. What I found was that I was missing wide mouth jars to really add to the collection. I had a few of these, but definitely not enough. I love using wide mouth jars for things like pickles because it's just easier to get the product into the jar. And so I like to use wide mouth for that. And I also wanted to do some canned meats last year. And so with the ground hamburger, it's just easy to put it into a wide mouth jar, and it's also easy to get it out of the jar. And so for that reason, I wanted to stock up on a few of the wide mouths. Wide mouths were a bit harder to come by as we got closer to canning season because I kind of changed my mind and I didn't really prepare for it as early as I could have. And so the closer it got to canning season, the harder it is to find jars of any size. And I also found that I really wanted to be able to shop around to get good prices, or at least as good of a price as I could have. And so that required starting ahead of time. I also found that I needed a few quart jars because I wanted to do a few more ferments, and some of the fermented items I like to have in quart jars. And so that was something that I needed to purchase a few more of. So now's a great time to take inventory of how many jars you have, how many jars you're planning to fill this year. Do you have the right size? Do you have the right shape? And begin adding more to your collection if that's something that you need. We have estate sales and garage sales coming up. A lot of people have been moving to different areas, so sometimes you'll find jars available at moving sales. So there are a few different options if you don't want to get them brand new from the store, but that all requires you knowing ahead of time that you're really looking for these items and putting in the time to prepare now before we get to canning season. Along with that, if you have jars, you definitely want to make sure that you have enough lids on hand. One of the reasons why I prefer using regular mouth jars is because the lids are a little bit less expensive. And because of that, that's always my first go-to. However, as I already shared, for some items like pickles or the canned meats, I prefer having a wide mouth jar. And so even though the wide mouth lids are a little bit more expensive, it's worth it for me to go ahead and use those particular jars. But I have to make sure that I have lids on hand. Last year wasn't quite as bad, but there have been a couple of times in the last couple of years where it was a little more challenging to get the lids. And so I've had to branch out to some different brands and looking at different places to purchase from. And so you just want to start early to make sure that you have all the lids you need on hand. The next thing you might want to consider stocking up on would be pectin. If you are wanting to make some jams or jellies, you might want to have your pectin on hand ready to go. Before you know it, it's going to be berry season, and typically that's what we're using to make our jams and jellies. And so you don't want to leave this till the last minute. Not all stores have pectin in stock. Of course, right now it's always a little bit harder to tell, but again, it's gone up in price significantly. If you want to have time to be able to search around and look for different price points and find the best deals or watch for things to be on sale, you definitely want to have this on your list of things to get right now. All right, so we've come to the next category that I want to discuss, and that is sweeteners. Now, I've been hearing from different sources that there could be an issue with sugar and that we might be looking at a sugar shortage at some point. I don't know whether or not that's something that's going to come to fruition, but what I do know is that the price of sugar has gone up significantly, and if you are wanting to purchase a large quantity of sugar, this might be something that you want to consider going ahead and stocking up on now. Because the price is significantly more, you might want to take the next few weeks to be able to budget some of these things out. And so you might want to kind of, again, look for a sale or see where you might want to pick up your sugar if you're doing your jams and jellies. Sometimes there are different sauces that require a bit of sugar. And so while I don't want to use too much sugar in my canning, I know that if I'm going to do any type of fruit product, I'm going to have some sort of sugar in that, whether that's making a syrup to go over the fruit or, like I said, using it in a jam or jelly. And so sugar is going to be something that I need for canning. Again, I don't know if there's going to be a shortage. That's just something that I have heard. But again, whether or not that comes to be, I think it's wise to have some on hand and ready to go. Now, sugar is not the only kind of sweetener that you might use for canning. Some people prefer to use honey. If you're choosing to use honey for canning, you want to be able to source that early and make sure that you have it on hand when you're ready to begin your canning process. All right, the next item on this list I have also heard is going to be in short supply this year, and that is vinegar. Now, again, I don't know if this is going to be the case or not, but I will tell you that my local store has no vinegar in stock, and they have not had vinegar for weeks. And the spot where the vinegar normally is no longer has a tag and label there. So I don't know if it's going to come back in stock at a significantly higher price, or if it's going to not be carried by the local store. I don't really know the deal with that. I do know that I was able to go a couple of towns over, and there was a good selection of the apple cider vinegar at that particular store, but it was definitely much more expensive than I have found it in the past, at least $1.50 more than I have paid for it before. So while the stock was good, the price was significantly higher. And my feeling with things like vinegar, it's not something that's going to go bad tomorrow. So it doesn't hurt to have a bit on hand just so that you're ready to go. The reason why I like to have apple cider vinegar is because I will add this to brines for things that are being pickled. We use it for ferments. I've also used it in different sauces or things that I might be making as well. And so I want to make sure that I have it on hand because it does play a significant role in a lot of the canning that I do. So whether or not this ends up being something that we see a shortage with, I don't think it hurts to stock up on it now and go ahead and have that on hand. One of the things we're doing with vinegar is changing that acidity, and you also might want to do that with some lemon juice. So some canning recipes will call for lemon juice to add a little bit more acidity to the recipe, and it is recommended for canning that you use the bottled lemon juice rather than squeezing it fresh or something like that, just because we know the acidity that's in the bottled juice, whereas you don't really have that control with something that you're squeezing fresh. So for canning purposes, I do use bottled lemon juice, and this is something you might want to consider adding to your list and stocking up on now. Next up, we have canning salt. And canning salt is something that, again, I use in a lot of brines, use it for some ferments. It's definitely integral in a lot of food preservation, and it's not something that's going to go bad. So I like to make sure that I have canning salt on hand. Again, the local store that I was talking about that doesn't have the vinegar also does not have the canning salt. And so this is something, again, that I was able to find a couple of towns over, but they did not have that much in stock. And so if you're planning to do a significant amount of canning or food preservation, you may have to make multiple trips or visit different stores to find what you actually need. And you want to make sure that you're starting early so that you have plenty of time to do that, and you're not in the midst of harvest season with your produce coming in and no way to preserve that. The next canning item that you may want to stock up on now is your spices. So last year I ended up running out of the whole mustard seed, and so I had to run to the store and grab some, which was not the most cost-effective way to do it because I know I could have found it at a lower price if I had had time to shop around and be able to get what I needed. So now's a great time to start considering what it is that you are going to be canning. And as you're looking through some of those canning recipes, think about which spices do you have on hand. Are you finding particular spices that are coming up over and over again that you could go ahead and start picking up now? Is there something that maybe you could purchase in bulk, which would help to save a little bit of money, as well as make sure that you have that for the canning season? So right now, spend a little bit of time just thinking about some of the recipes that you might want to use this year, and think about some of those spices and seasonings that you may want to have on hand. Next up is tomato paste. Now, if you've seen some of my past videos or you've been around the homestead for a while, you may know that I absolutely love tomato products, particularly salsa. That's something that I use a lot of and something that I can every single year. And in my salsa recipe, I need to use tomato paste. This is something that we have noticed in short supply in years past, and as we're coming into this year and kind of going through things, we've talked a bit in the past about tomato issues and how that could affect production and availability in the future. And we're now coming into that season where we may start to see some of those issues on store shelves. So this is a great time to start looking at tomato paste and making sure that you have some on hand so that if you are growing your own tomatoes and planning to can your own, you have that paste available to use. The last item on this list I don't have in front of me to share with you, but depending on the recipes that you're using, you may want to consider if you're going to need thickening agents or not. A lot of people prefer to use things like clear gel, and so if you have sauces or things that you're planning to can that need to be a little bit thicker, just take a look and see if you have those particular thickening agents on hand. And now would be a great time to stock up on some of those things. We went over quite a few items, and I know that this list is not all encompassing. There are other things that you could add to this essentials list. Feel free to add some of those in the comments below, and let's just kind of brainstorm and get some other ideas of things that we could be stocking up on right now that are going to help put us in a better position for the future. As you are thinking through this upcoming canning season and you're thinking about the food preservation that you're hoping to do, it's not too early to start getting prepared and stocking up on these items. We know that the cost of everything has gone up significantly, but there are some ways that you can combat some of those price increases. In order to do that, you have to start early. So by looking and preparing right now, you can budget things out, you can look for sales, you can talk to some of your friends and see about buying certain things in bulk where you can get a reduced price on them. Just take this time to kind of think through some of those things so that you can get your preservation done even while working within the confines of a budget. If today's video was helpful, please click like, and I'd love to have you subscribe and be part of our community here at Blooming Wildwood Homestead. I can't wait to see you back here next time. Until then, bye everyone.